And my idea is that we take over everywhere, and eventually the whole world is an Irish empire, and that we finally spell the cities' names correctly, like Chicago instead of Chicago, and call America Americae, which is what our ancestors used to call it.
That was the voice of Paddy Cullivan, creator of the I Can't Believe It's Not Ireland show, soon to appear in America in February and March. And I'm Martin Nutty.
And I'm John Lee. Welcome to a new season of our Global Irish Nation here on Irish Stew. And Martin, we ended our last season with a bang.
Yeah, it's been an interesting few weeks for us. A few months ago, we had the good fortune of being shortlisted for 3 Irish Pod Awards. And last week, we won a bronze medal for Best Podcasting Hosting Duo. And even better, we were a winner of the Best Society and Culture Award. So now we've got a little hardware to decorate our shelves.
Yeah, I guess the term is gobsmacked. We didn't see that one coming, but we're very, very happy to get it. And we head into the new year with something big and different. It's our Irish Stew Gets Lost in Belfast season. It's about to roll out thanks to the support of Tourism Ireland. And it's going to start the episode after this one. We'll take you along on our travels. We talked to Niall McKenna at the Waterman House, a restaurant, a cooking school, and we also talk about his great new book. We talked to the great Jerry White, who moved from behind the bar to set up a distillery, making the excellent Jawbox Gin. And we went to Belfast's oldest cultural organization, the Linen Hall Library, where we talked to CEO Julie Andrews.
And we had the pleasure of being hosted in Belfast City Hall by Lord Mayor Mickey Murray. We paid a visit to Anthony and Andrea Kiernan at the Regency House, their hoteliers. And then that evening, we fetched up at the Titanic Hotel for the wonderful Belfast International Homecoming Gala, hosted by former guest Martine O'Muir.
And then right back at it in the morning, took a cab down, about 25-minute ride to the Hinch Distillery, got a great tour, tasting, and back again into Belfast, where we met with the unbelievable one and only Belfast Night Czar, Michael Stewart, who was a tremendous help to us all along the Belfast road trip, along with Caroline Wilson of the Taste and Tour Belfast. Talked all about the food scene, the nightlife scene in that great town. Belfast homecoming reception that evening at the American Consul General's residence, and then on to the Duncairn Arts Center to hear the amazing Suzanne Savage.
And the pace continued the following day. We took a road trip out of Belfast up to Dunluce Castle, famous from Game of Thrones. And naturally, if you're in that neighborhood, we took a stroll at the Giant's Causeway, all facilitated by our great guide, Dee Morgan, kindly provided to us by Tourism Ireland. The following day, we had the odd experience of sipping whiskey in a jail, and we paid a visit to McConnell's Distillery at the Crumlin Road Jail. And then to conclude our hectic 5 days in Belfast, Northern Ireland, we finished it off with a literary moment with the poet Linda McKenna. And there will be a couple of other supplementary episodes to go along with this. But now we turn our attention to today's guest, a gentleman by the name of Paddy Cullivan. For those of you who watched the Late Late Show during the Ryan Tubridy era, you'll probably know who he is. But let's say he's a musical entertainer crossed with a historian. And we're going to introduce him with a little of his music, and then we'll get right at it. So hold on, tune in, and enjoy.
Partition never works out fine. From Pakistan to Palestine, can't you see? It's a last century, and we'll never be free till it's gone. But to explain, in 1920, we were the first in line.
Welcome to the podcast, Paddy Cullivan.
Thanks so much, guys. It's an honor and a privilege.
I'm going to kick it off this way, Paddy. I want to know when you developed a appreciation for one of France's revered soft cheeses.
You're talking about my band, the Camembert Quartet.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It struck
well,
me as being an unusual name.
You started in the middle of the story, let's be honest.
Like all good novels. Actually, good novels
Yeah.
start at the end of the story.
Maybe the preamble isn't worthy, but I'll try my best. Yeah, my band is the Camembert Quartet, still going strong. We've been together about 21 years. We're supposedly going to celebrate the release of our second album in 2004, and then we missed that totally, so we'll have to do it next year. I started out, I was born in the mid-70s, and my dad's Tom Cullivan, and he features quite largely in my show. And my mom was an artist from New Jersey, would you believe? So she came over in the 60s. I was born in the 70s. And it was a very artistic upbringing, moving to Dublin, living in a Georgian house, and then going to art college. I went to NCAD. But before that, I went to school in Mount Temple, where U2 went to school. And as U2 in the 80s, Martin was a religion as well. But I was kind of more into Queen, but I had to keep that quiet, okay? But I do like the lads. To me, U2 are like the United Irishmen of Irish bands, because it's got two Protestants, a Presbyterian, and a Catholic who refuses to move to the south side. And if anybody knows what that means, it means that the north side of Dublin is quite Catholic, and the south side are where some of the posher, more Protestant people live. But after art college, you see, I was into art, I was into graphics, and then I was doing gigs already with bands and everything like that. And so I went straight into music. And then by the early 2000s, I formed the Camembert Quartet because we were doing kind of cheesy versions of covers, and we became like a Frank Zappa of Ireland type band. We released 2 albums. We met Ryan Tubridy. Ryan Tubridy liked us so much he got us on his radio show, because like we used to do a version of Anarchy in the UK by the Sex Pistols, but we do it in the style of Frank Sinatra, because I like to call it Frank's Revenge, because Sid Vicious covered My Way so horribly in the great rock and roll swindle movie. So he loved that, got us onto the show, and then onto his own TV show for 5 years. And then the Camembert Quartet in 2009 become the house band on the longest running chat show in the world, The Late Late Show, which we did for 10 years. We played with everybody from Russell Crowe to Sinead O'Connor to Buddy Greco, Michael Bublé. So it was a great kind of learning curve to do all of that. But then in 2016 was the centenary of the 1916 Rising. And the other interest that I hadn't really indulged in came to the fore, history, because the centenary in Ireland was so, how can I say, historically flawed. Dermot Ferreter, the historian, has a different word for it, which he called ahistorical. I won't say the word, but it starts with a B. I decided to put these together to expose the real history underneath the kind of established history we tell ourselves. The first show was the 10 Dark Secrets of the Irish Revolution. The next one I did in 2018 was the 10 Dark Secrets of 1798, where my love for the United Irishmen and Wolfe Tone and heroes like this, who were all Protestant, by the way, came to the fore. And then COVID hit. I stopped doing the Late Late Show, although the Camembert Quartet is still a great going concern. That's my main job that I do. And then over COVID, I took 2 of the Dark Secrets, the murder of Michael Collins and the murder of Wolfe Tone, and I made them into full shows, which after COVID ended, I started to bring out into the public. Now, all during this time as well, guys, I was doing satire. I wrote for Oliver Callan, did political satire with David McWilliams in his Leviathan podcast with my great friend Nisha Nunn. So I've been doing so many different things, but it's all come down to this, where I combine all of these graphic design, imagery, comedy, music into one show, and especially historical, what I call historical entertainment. So now my description as jack of all trades, master of none, which I think is a great thing to have, by the way. I've always hated that phrase. I'm a historical entertainer who likes Camembert cheese.
You're not leaving a lot for the rest of us to do here. Right? I'm looking at your background: writer, storyteller, comic, performer, singer, guitar player, keyboard player, MC, radio, TV. What about the rest of us? What can the rest of us do?
I don't know, guys. Maybe it's my mom's American work ethic. You know, the way in America everyone has to have 3 jobs. Over in Ireland, in our socialist paradise, we barely have to do 1. I got that American work ethic from it all, and still only managed to kind of earn enough to live for one human being. Well, in my plutocratic world, it's what I need to live.
Yeah, I noticed from your background, art history. And I was, at least the bio we saw on the Speakers Bureau. Did you study art history?
Yes, it was a big part of my education in college. And the funny thing is, you know, I set the historical world on fire in Ireland from 2016, because when you say the murder of Michael Collins, it drives both Republican people and Free State people absolutely mad. I've written an article about Wolfe Tone in History Ireland, and the letters have never stopped. And it's just, I was quite controversial in what I did. I think what I do is controversial, but it's only controversial because we've been listening to establishment stories for so long that it really shocks people when I dig underneath and I find out that, hey, Wolfe Tone, maybe he didn't do away with himself in his prison cell. Maybe Michael Collins wasn't shot by a one-armed guy whose right arm wasn't working, who never did sniper practice down in Bale-na-Blaw. And once you expose this, it drives everybody crazy.
We're going to probe these history elements a little bit deeper, but I'm intrigued by the fact that your mother was born in New Jersey, and she's not Irish American, but maybe American Irish. And what intrigued me about that is that Irish identity and who qualifies as being Irish is a lot in the news at the moment because of, let's say, political issues in a lot of different places. I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on that identity. How Irish do you feel? How American do you feel?
This is a big part of my new show, I Can't Believe It's Not Ireland, because I project into the future. And one of the most controversial elements of the show is that I do away with the tricolour. And I know this will drive so many people crazy. But for me, the tricolour represents identity politics at its worst, which is you're saying that a section of Ireland is orange and Protestant and loyalist, and another section is green and Catholic and nationalist, and that is it. And the white in between is peace between the two, and we're all meant to love that flag. I can't stand it because it absolutely gets the story completely wrong. Irish republicanism was invented by Presbyterians and Protestants in Ireland. And in the first part of my show, I reinterpret Irish history, but also Irish American history, because identity is a funny thing. My mom came over because she loved W.B. Yeats, an Anglo-Irish poet, of course, who was also a Protestant. And she was meant to tour the rest of Europe, but met my dad and ended up staying in Galway. And as you know, guys, anyone who goes to Galway, it's a very hard place to leave. They call it the graveyard of ambition. I'm not being mean about the town. It's just so much fun. And I am living there now. But again, even the identity, to say that is so wrong. We need a new flag to represent one people. Remember that Wolfe Tone's greatest quote is that he wants to get rid of all dissension among Irish people and substitute the common name of Irishman in place of Protestant, Catholic, and dissenter. Dissenter meaning Presbyterian. But again, in even Irish America, it's so interesting that the identity there, it seems to come across like a superannuated nationalist Irish community lives in America who have it all wildly wrong about America. I don't think they do, actually. American Irishism is as valid, if not more valid, because in our struggle for modernism on the island of Ireland, we're trying to be like Swedes or something else. Who the hell knows what we're trying to be at the moment, because it's a very strange place at the moment. But in America, even, like, one of the statistics I bring up in the show is that out of the 37 million or so Irish Americans, 53% of them are from a Protestant or Presbyterian background, but they would call themselves Scots-Irish, or we have a vice president now who's an actual hillbilly. And instead of making fun of him in Ireland, we should be trying to find out what village he came from in the north and bestowing him the Irish citizenship we do to all Catholic Irish presidents. And so these things are not well known. We seem to think that all of the immigrants to America that were Irish come from post-famine. They're all Catholics. They all live in Boston, whatever. But in fact, 250,000 Presbyterians left Ireland between 1700 and 1800 because they were also being discriminated against with penal laws, which is something that nobody knows. And that's why they've moved to America. They've got far more enlightened ideas. These are the guys that formed the rump of the founding fathers. These are the guys who signed the Declaration of Independence. These are the guys who bring us the first ever republic, the American Revolution. And so our perceptions of history are so wrong, and our perceptions of identity especially are wrong. We need to stop talking in Ireland and America about all the different identities. And once again, as Wolfe Tone might say, come together under the common name of American or Irishman. That's what I think.
You're referencing the show that's coming to the U.S. very soon. I Can't Believe It's Not Ireland. And we were able to see a version of the show on video, and you get the feeling it's a show that's always evolving. It's a one person, you're out there for all by yourself with some audiovisual aids and some music. Where did that come from? You know, the sort of the form of the show. Why don't you give us a description of the form of the show? And where was the seriousness under the comedy, or the comedy on top of the seriousness of what you're saying? How did those two threads come together?
Well, I mean, I've always wanted comedy. I think you've got to have comedy in shows. I think if it's a serious lecture for 90 minutes, you're doomed. But all my shows are one-man shows. They're 45 minutes per half with a 15-minute break. And they start off with audio-visual or film or something like that, and then I come on, and then there are songs involved. I've over 300 images in the show. And what I'm trying to do is get across very complicated history very simply, but also ideas, and also poke a bit of fun as well. Like this is not to take unseriously our histories, but let's say with my past shows, I was dealing with the past. And it was a big hit in Ireland. Murder Michael Collins, Murder Wolfe Tone. They were big hits because people came out in droves to see, what is this really about? And they loved the story, and they walked away, but they walked away shaking their heads, going, why have we believed these lies for so long? The new show I wanted to do was based on not just reinterpreting our history in the first half, but also imagining a united Ireland in the future. And that's why it's called I Can't Believe It's Not Ireland. So when I was bringing the Murder Wolfe Tone around the country, a lot of Protestants and Presbyterians were attending the show up the north, which was really interesting because since Brexit, all bets are off in the north. 60% of northern people voted against Brexit, and yet they had to accept it. And a lot of those would have been middle-class Protestant people. So they've come out to the show because if we're going to discuss a united Ireland, and we're not really talking about it properly in Ireland. We're always saying it's going to be 10, 20, 30 years away. I have it in 2032 because these things happen so quickly, a bit like Brexit itself. Nobody expected Britain to leave the EU in 2015. No one expected it. And so what I wanted to do is, as I was going around the north, I was seeing all these people really interested in, coming to places like Downpatrick, which is 90% Catholic, and yet 60% of my audience were Protestant. And they were all getting on together. And like the perception in the north is that it's still 1992 and everybody hates each other. This is not true. People get on the ground all the time. And they're talking all the time about the future. So I went to my friend Stephen McCracken, who's a descendant of Henry Joy McCracken, and he was running an 11-day festival on 1798 in Antrim town, which is predominantly loyalist, and yet people were coming out in droves to see and learn their history. Because remember, the rebellion in 1798 in the north was again run by Protestants and Presbyterians, like his ancestor Henry Joy. So I was sitting with him and going, I want to do a show about a united Ireland. I want to talk about the future, but I don't want to call it United Ireland because the connotations are too much. I don't want to call it Agreed Ireland or Shared Ireland, which are these kind of wishy-washy terms, or New Ireland, because new gets old very quickly. And he says, Paddy, why don't you call it I Can't Believe It's Not Ireland? And I was going like, I can't believe it's not butter? Yeah, why not? And when I thought about it, I knew what he meant, because all countries are invented. So not only in the 6 counties during the division, the partition of Ireland, was a 6-county Northern Ireland invented, but in the South, we invented a new country. It took 2 years. We had an anthem, we had a flag, and by 1949, we'd left the Commonwealth, and we'd done all these things to be independent and different, but that is only a conjured-up Ireland, and it's a very predominantly Catholic Ireland, which does not represent what the whole 32 counties of the country are. And so my idea with this new show was not just to show the history, and especially the history of the Protestants and the Presbyterians and the Irish Americans, how the Protestants were right about 4 times in Irish history in not engaging, and then also what happened in America. And also then in the second half, I project after a referendum in 2030 where we vote for United Ireland, I use AI imagery. I project into the future to imagine the new country in 2032, united both sides of the border, and it's a brand new place. And in fact, I used the research of a guy called Professor Brendan O'Leary, who's out in Pennsylvania. He's done incredible work with the Aaron's Project, where he's actually interviewed absolutely everybody, north and south, to say, what do you want? What would work for you? And what he found was, in the South, people are very dedicated to holding on to things like the anthem, the flag. We will never rejoin the Commonwealth, that dreadful thing run by King Charles III. And then when you ask people in the North, Catholics and nationalists, they said, sure, we don't mind. Sure, we never had that anthem. And the tricolour doesn't really matter as much. And the Commonwealth, so what? What's wrong with it? So in fact, it's the Southern people that would need to be convinced. And so I use all of this research to figure out, A, how we get it, and then B, what it's going to be like. And I have a brand new flag. I have a new Parliament building in Athlone, because no one's ever going to agree on Belfast or Dublin being the capital. Let's be quite honest. So why not have a town right in the middle of the country, to misquote Gilbert O'Sullivan, Athlone again, not Tralee. And we'll even have a new anthem called O Hibernia, because our old anthem is something that Protestants will never sing. And like all anthems, it's about war and bombing and fighting, and it's called the Soldier's Song, for God's sake. And so I want to do an anthem that's more about the beautiful things about Ireland, how nice we are and how funny we are and how we build things and all of this stuff. That's really what a modern day anthem should be like. So I use some of my dad's classical music, I put it together, and you'll see the anthem in the show when I'm over in America. And I'm telling you, I'm getting rounds of applause. I'm getting standing ovations after the song because I think people are getting sick of the old stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting, of course, because of the old soldier song anthem, as you point out, is very militaristic and it's blood and guts stuff. The flag and the anthem, it speaks to the thumbnail histories that we carry around with us and items that we think are non-negotiable. But it feels to me that your comedy is a way to break a logjam in a whole different way where people can't possibly do that in a serious conversation. It creates a permission. I wonder if you could reflect on that a little bit.
I was one of the first out Sinn Féin voters back in the 90s, which would be a surprise to you hearing what I've just been talking about. But one thing I learned from doing the history shows was that we must learn our history and we must never forget it. But we've got to stop living the same Groundhog Day that we have about our history at the moment. It quite simply, it was funny. Brendan O'Leary was over in Galway when he visited last summer in the Euro final between England and Spain. I was cheering for England. You know what I mean? And it was driving him mad. And everybody else in the bar was cheering for Spain. And I was going, but guys, these are our closest neighbours. There's something like 6 million Irish people living in Britain. There's about 3 guys on the football team who are actually Irish, with Irish surnames. So our connection with Britain is so important. And what we really need to do is forget this, if you don't mind me saying, endless victimhood mentality, which I think is another part of what's going on in the world at the moment. And I don't want to use the W word, which is woke, but there is a new religion in Ireland. And because we love throwing away a religion, but we have to pick one up as quick as possible, lads. We have to pick one up. And I would call that religion progressivism. It's also reiterating the victimhood, reiterating the stuff, singing the wolf tone songs, doing all that stuff. And what I think what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to do 21st century rebel songs. I'm trying to do songs that bring us to the future. I'm so aware of the past, and I've stood so firmly on that for so long. But there is a time that you must move forward. And that's what my show is all about. Because we keep talking a good game about a united Ireland. People are calling for citizens' assemblies to do with a united Ireland. If Britain tomorrow decides to have a border poll, they will have to have it. And there will have to be and no one will have thought about it. No one will have thought about the nuts and bolts. And that's why I've done this show. A, to make people laugh, but also to make them learn. You've got to get this information across very easily. And also let people know, guys, you can't sit down in a negotiation. Now, I do this show for schools, and it's very funny. One kid was really, really into it. He was in Sligo and going, I don't like getting rid of those 3 things, the anthem, the flag, and rejoining the Commonwealth. And I said, why? He says, I just don't want to. Okay, we should do one of them, but not all 3. And I said, okay, you should come to negotiations. You sound like you're a really tough negotiator. So a 12-year-old kid had more insight into it than a lot. But also they were asking, would we go back to violence? Would we do this? And they're all important questions. But the point is, at least we're talking about it. And the problem is no one is talking about it at the moment. Bar Ireland Future, an incredible group that I'm involved with. But in the general public, we need to get more and more people. So I've been touring the whole thing. I've done it 100 times around Ireland in 2024 because we've got to be prepared. Because Britain, Keir Starmer and all that, he's talked, we're broke. Why are we paying for this thing? I also show how we pay for it. I go to the nuts and bolts of the economy too. This is I've covered everything and it's good fun. We take one of those old taxes that H.L. Mencken might say, once we get 2 taxes, we never get rid of it. But we use that to pay for Northern Ireland. It's a thing called the USC, the Universal Social Charge, which is very antisocial, to be honest. And all of these things have been thought about. But yes, I'm trying to bring us forward. Forward is great. I've dealt with the past all my life. I want to bring us forward.
I think it's a good sign that we can talk about these things with humor, that you can drive the discussion now with humor instead of with grim, bloody statistics and imagery, that humor can lead the way. And in your show, I Can't Believe It's Not Ireland, there's aspects of it that are really, if I'm saying it correctly, over the top. And I think it's like you're projecting out pretty far and you're giving people room to think big themselves of how this thing could be.
Absolutely. And it's got to be fun. Think about this. It's like having a Meccano set. Like you're sitting there going, we're not just going to take the 6 counties and lump it onto the 26 and make it the Ireland that it always was, just with another 2 million people added to it. We've got a chance to make a brand new country. And in doing this, really what I'm trying to do is show that this has got to be fun. And there's a lot of fun aspect of the show. Is like, I go from deadly serious things like how we pay for it and the vote and everything like this to like, which Tato do we use? Now, Tato, as people will know on your podcast, is a very popular crisp. It's an antisocial crisp, and that's so smelly, cheese and onion, that the person you are kissing, let's say, must also eat the Tato or you'll never talk to them again. So there's a northern version of this Tato and a southern version of this Tato. And even those negotiations are fraught, and I go through it and I show us how we're going to get that across the line. A lot of this is also to convince Protestants that this is going to be a safe and fun place for them to live, and to convince Southern people that this whole idea will be safe too. And there's also fun stuff like the All Ireland logo, where, I mean, if you imagine Ireland as a person, his head is Donegal, his arms are Mayo and Galway, his legs are Kerry and Cork, but nobody knows what Clare is. They should just fill in the Shannon there because it looks a bit suggestive. But I'm looking at Clare as we speak, but the county, not a person. And yeah, it's got to be fun, but it's also about ideas. The whole thing is about ideas and changing people's brains and letting them know, guys, there's another way to do this. But again, it's also about unifying people and bringing people back together. That's the tenet of Wolfe Tone. Wolfe Tone, in my mind, is our founding father. He's up there with George Washington. He's up there with Jefferson as an ideas man. We know what the promise of the Declaration of Independence was, but that's also what Wolfe Tone was saying. The promise is that we're all equal. We know Martin Luther King had to come and say, hey, can we cash this promissory note check, please? And it did eventually happen. But at least the intent was there and the idea was there, and it's an idea that never grows old.
You know, Martin and I had a great opportunity this fall. We spent a week in Belfast, and we're going to be rolling out a dozen episodes following your episode on our trip to Belfast. And what I found, and I don't want to belittle anything, but a lot of that Protestant Catholic thing that when we encountered it felt more like Yankees versus Red Sox. It was this sort of, look, I'm here with this damn Protestant, or like, I'm here with this damn Yankee fan. And I know it goes a lot deeper than that, but just to see that, at least as we're going around, was so promising. We had a great time there. We had a guy who grew up in the Shankill Road taking us to interview a guy who grew up in the Falls Road. And you could see in the conversations, a seriousness would come on people at certain times as they recalled some things that they had been through.
I do a lot of shows. I sell it out quite regularly, and I've got a lot of fans up there. I'd have my best attendances up there. But I will agree with that the differences between people, are tiny, really, when you look at it. My issue is, I think that they're still a little bit caught, and I'm one of those people that can be critical of the people I support. So though I think Sinn Féin are pretty good on things that I like, which are to do with Ireland, I'm not so enamored of international geopolitics. But there are great conversations happening. I would do the Féile every year, for instance, which is the biggest public festival in Belfast. But I also like to do my venues where Protestants will come along and feel welcome. But I mean, a lot of great Protestants, like Reclaim the Enlightenment, are a great bunch of Protestants and Presbyterians who run a kind of a Bastille Day thing every year, and we all come together in Sailortown Church. And friends of mine who are doing like the 1798 walking tour, like Sean Napier, who himself is a Presbyterian, Colm Dorr, who is a Catholic, obviously, and they come together and do a walking tour of Belfast, explaining the 1798 rebellion and the great fervour that went on there. So these great things are happening. At the same time, at the end of the Féile every year, they book the Wolfe Tones, and you get thousands of people shouting up the Ra. That's okay. That's a cultural issue. But all I'm saying is, we might be a little bit more circumspect. We know that these are inspiring songs. We know that these are from a different time. We know all of that. But the problem is, are we holding out a hand of welcome by doing that? Or are we saying, eventually we'll have the upper hand? I know that's not the motivation, maybe, but maybe that's how it's interpreted or perceived. I think I'm trying to find a middle ground and say, look, guys, more Wolfe Tone, less Wolfe Tones. That's my catchphrase.
I'm curious. Obviously, you've been touring around Ireland, Paddy, with the I Can't Believe It's Not Ireland show. How do you adapt that for an American audience that are maybe not quite as familiar with recent history, or even back to the 1798, which I think is a lot of the touchstone of what your show references?
Well, that's interesting. I am in the process, starting in San Francisco, 28th of February and March 1st, Kansas City on the 4th of March, the 7th, Boston on the 8th, and then the Great New York Center on the 12th of March. And then I'm going to a weird place called Port Jefferson that a great friend of mine Gráinne de Butler said, come on over and do a show here. And I hear it's lovely and it looks gorgeous. And I just hope there's enough Irish people there or people who are just interested to come and see that show. I don't think I'm going to change a thing, Martin. I don't think I'm going to change a thing. Because for me, I think there's this terrible insult. And I'm not doing down my people over here. But there's a perception that Irish Americans need things to be simplified and brought down. Now, in the first half of the show is a full history of Ireland from way, way back to ancient times. And it was originally called Hibernia, land of winter by the Romans. You know, Ireland defies climate change, you know, because it was raining then, just as it's raining right now, and it's freezing. And one of the reasons I want to get to America in March is because I'm just so cold the whole time here. And I know you're saying, oh, we're in the middle of winter here, we're freezing. But there's a dry cold there, my friends, a dry cold. You know the cold in Ireland. It just gets into your bones. It's a dampness and a mist that never escapes you. But I think I'm not going to change it because it's very simple. I lay it out very simply. It's the kind of show I can do in schools. And once I bring it through the whole history, you have a good idea. And then the future is just a lot of fun. And I do things in it which I think will correspond with American people. For instance, you know, Ireland got rid of a lot of its railway system, copying the Brits in the 60s and just closing down tons of lines. So there's 1,000 kilometers where there used to be 6,000. So I come up with this idea of a high-speed rail called the Sneachta Piercer. Sneachta, of course, being the Irish for snow. And it just circumnavigates the island 24 hours a day. You can get from Belfast to Dublin in 20 minutes, Athlone to Galway in 15 minutes. It just connects the whole island together. And it was funny because when I was booking the San Francisco show with Liam Reedy, I was saying, like, how am I going to get from San Francisco to Kansas? And I saw the flight was like 180 quid and it takes 2.5 hours. Okay, but you know what I'd love to do? I'd love to see the Rockies. Those train lines that Chinese and Irish people just broke their bodies digging and tunneling through this amazing mountain range. I'd love to get a train to Kansas. And then I found that the train takes 49 hours.
Yeah.
And I was like going, okay, first of all, I didn't really predict how big America was, even though I'm American and I should know. But when I talked to Liam, he said, no, you see a lot of freight goes along that line and trains just aren't prioritized in America. And I always laugh at the way that Ireland and America are so similar that way. Yeah. We're in love with cars. We love these flat, long roads that we drive forever. We're in love with bad country music. Ireland is really a 51st state. We're against public travel. We're far more into our individualism and our cars and all the rest of it. But if there's one country that needs high-speed rail, it's America. I swear to God.
Yeah, there was an idea that comes out towards the end of I Can't Believe It's Not Ireland, and really liked it. Because I've kind of promoted a similar point of view, and I called it Irish total world domination. But you have a much more, a much gentler term, Pax Hibernia. Tell us a little bit more what you meant.
Pax Hibernia.
As long as it's not Pox Hibernia. We switch a letter, it could be trouble.
Yeah, well, as you know, Martin, poxy is a great Dublin word. You're only a pox, you know. Yeah,
absolutely.
Pax Hibernia, yeah. Look, it's something that once we get Ireland right, you see, this is my belief. But it's also, there's a deeper question. Once Ireland is right, I feel that we should use the power of the diaspora, the 40 million Irish Americans, the 20 million British Irish, to kind of influence the world. But I want us to influence the world in a way of peace. And it's an issue in this country at the moment that we're not going down that road. We're leaving Wolfe Tone's idea of neutrality, which was, his famous quote was, peace with all the world is our object and our desire. And my idea is that we take over everywhere and eventually the whole world is an Irish empire, and that we finally spell the cities' names correctly, like Chicago instead of Chicago, and call America Americae, which is what our ancestors used to call it. But far from the funny stuff and far from all that, I really believe that Ireland, instead of picking sides in geopolitical things and doing all of this stuff, needs to really be careful, but also remember where we come from. In 1998, we had a peace process, and it worked, and it has worked and continued to work. And this is one of the only places in the world that's happened. And so instead of coming out both arms fighting and coming down on the sides of different people in geopolitical battles and wars, we need to come out and say, we're the Irish and we know how to make peace. We're very good at it, actually. We're very good at negotiation, and we're very good at showing you a third way. And this is what I'm trying to do in my show. And so I believe that as we bring peace to the world subsumes to Irishness. So instead of going, we better send more arms to this, or we better do that, or I stand with, we just get everyone sitting down for a pint of Guinness and say, now lads, shake hands. Would you just shake hands and put it behind you? And honestly, I know it sounds simplistic, but that really is the Irish way. And we're not the fighting Irish, we're the stop fighting Irish. And we're not just peacekeepers, but peacemakers. And that's really where we should be going. And I feel by doing that, eventually, we get people kind of tipsy enough that they all go, I'll swear allegiance to Ireland. And eventually in 2132 AD, we have an entirely Irish world. I have a beautiful map of it at the end of the show. And then before it sounds too grandiose and insane, I said, I've lost it, folks, haven't I? I really have. I have.
So let's ask this. Put on your mad scientist hat and you're going to grow a new Irishman. What is the good Irishman of 2032? What does he or she leave behind? And what I'm asking you is, what should it mean to be Irish?
It's a very difficult question, Martin, because I always laugh at people saying, what does it mean to be Irish? And they go, well, we love potatoes. And I go, well, sure, potatoes are from America. They're an import. They're the French call the infernal root vegetable. And they caused enough trouble in our lives. And then they say, well, the Irish love tea. And I go, well, we love tea, but it comes from India. There's nothing inherently Irish about tea or potatoes. And then I was talking to a friend of mine up in Donegal, and I said, what's the inherent quality of Irishness? And they said, be an acute whore. Now, I know that's a terrible thing to brand an entire bunch of people with, but I know what he means. It's to do with my peacemaking thing or getting people together. It's this way that Irish people have of circumventing conflict and circumnavigating things and making things happen. We're incredibly hard workers, especially when we go away. We're great builders. We're great people at negotiation. We're great people at but now a lot of it is for selfish reasons. But you see, altruism and selfishness can come together in great ways. And it's that ability, like with our tax system. There are so many American companies in Ireland that are paying only 12% tax because for some reason, though we're members of the EU, we found a way to sneak around them and go, lads, come on over here. It's much better and we'll give you a far better tax rate. That's what I call Irish cute tourism. It's our way of just making things a bit better for ourselves. Now, I think a good Irishman in 2032, because over here it's a bit fraught at the moment. I don't know how you guys feel, but in Ireland, as an American Irishman, I feel strange because I'm an Irish Republican, but in America, I'm a different kind of a creature. I'm not necessarily with the Democrats and all of that stuff. And like people in Ireland, a lot of them go, oh, Robert F. Kennedy, he's a bit of oh God, I don't know about that. I was down at Kilconomics. It was fantastic. And everyone was giving out about the fact, we don't have any friends now anymore in the White House. And I was going, lads, there's a Kennedy there. There's a Kennedy. We normally roll out the red carpet for Kennedys. Now, just because you don't like Trump doesn't mean that Robert F. Kennedy is not a useful person in terms of getting towards a united Ireland. And we need to stop treating one side of the American divide in America as if it's totally against us, and the other side as if they're completely with us, because it doesn't necessarily work that way, guys. And which is why I always say we need to stop thinking that American politics is only pro-Irish on one side. We have J.D. Vance, like I said, a hillbilly, probably from Ulster somewhere. You have Robert F. Kennedy there now. So instead of critiquing constantly, which is what happens in the Irish establishment media, it doesn't happen among the people that much. But we took the side of the Democrats and we take this, but we have 4 years here, guys. And the problem is the 4 years can't be about critiquing America and giving out about them and doing all the rest of it and getting involved in things that are not our concern. We are a country that needs to stand alone and build itself up to the point where we're a united country. And let's look at the positive things that we can do and the positive help we can get from America in the next 4 years, instead of going, I can't stand your man. That's the end of it. I was just down at Trump Doonbeg. I play there quite a bit. It's a magnificent hotel in West Clare. Wonderful staff, amazing place. And as I always laugh, for all the presidents we came over to us, and we built a truck stop for Obama, and we had a homestead for Kennedy, and there was a cottage in Ballyporeen for Reagan. But the only guy who's ever invested any money in this country is Donald J. Trump. And I know you won't like that, guys, but it's the actual fact. He employed 305 people in a town of 700. And it's a wonderful place, I'm sorry to say.
Well, neither Martin or I are golfers, so we'll have to take that on faith. We're heading towards the end here. And one last question before we get to our friend Seamus Plug. What have you learned from doing the show? What's your takeaway? What surprised you as you've done it? As you've felt the audience coming back at you?
Yeah, the funny thing about this show is it's been done 50 to 100 times. And as we say in the theatre world, my friends, you grow your show. So the initial show was quite long and clunky, and I had to get rid of lots of bits. It opens with a funny sequence Star Wars theme, Star Wars Part 10, here's what happens in the future. And then a Protestant comes down to Dublin for the very first time, and he goes around Dublin and sees how English it is. He goes, why was I worried this whole time? They have royal in front of everything, the Royal Dublin Society, the Royal College of Surgeons, the Royal this and that. They've just opened a new conference centre called the Royal Dublin Conference Centre. And I'm going, Royal who? Brian Boru? What is this? But so it's good fun. But what I've learned is especially getting feedback from people and saying, wow, that's interesting. That's pretty, I never thought about that before. But I only thought about it because I really went in and researched it and read a lot. And all my life, I've been looking at this history and going, something? When the Protestants wanted an Ulster in 1922, they were pretty correct. I mean, Belfast was the most advanced city in the world at that time. And the rest of Ireland was a basket case. So for them, in their estimation, they did the right thing. Now it's the other way around. So, Ireland's economy is 5 times better than the North and all the rest of it, Southern Ireland, I mean. And so I learned a lot of things, but I also learned by looking at the Protestant history and then the Protestant experience in America and the Irish American experience in America that things are a lot more sophisticated. They're a lot more complex than we believe. And, having done all these shows since 2016, I think I've altered an awful lot of my views. I think research helps you to alter your view. And it doesn't mean that I don't agree with what I agreed with before, but I'm not as simplistic in my belief. And I think everybody needs to come to something like this because what people have said when they go to the show is, okay, look, I learned stuff I never learned before. And I was entertained. I thought it was amazing. But the best feeling that they have at the end of the show is they feel hopeful and they feel optimistic. That's what I wanted to create because every time people leave my other shows, which are they're great shows and everyone enjoys them, but they're like, oh God, I didn't know this history and I feel sad about it. I feel really upset. With this show, people walk away going, wow, there's hope for the future. There's optimism in the air because we're living in pretty dark times, guys. Let's be honest. And I want to do something that's a bit of a beacon of light and a bit of hope for the future because we seem to be stuck literally in our own little bubbles at the moment. And we're not thinking collectively or thinking together for the future. It's an Irish word called mehel, where we help each other out and we're a community-based. It's not communism. It's not socialism because that will never happen in Ireland. Everyone likes their one-off houses too much, as do I, and I agree with it completely. But this feeling of community and of thinking together and looking forward to the future, people feel optimistic and happy and hopeful at the end of the show. And I have a couple of more songs in the show. I have another song called the Partition song, which kind of gives a history of partition. It shows that this stupid 20th century concept called partition hasn't worked anywhere it's ever been tried, from Israel to India to Korea to Vietnam to Ireland itself. But I'm also showing people that this is an old-fashioned idea. And the real thing we need to do is get together in America and in Ireland and become one people again and become one people optimistically looking forward to the future. And that's how I think we need to go because there's too much either victimhood or victim blaming or identifying as this, identifying as that, and everyone is at loggerheads. And it's just the wrong way for humanity to be at this advanced point in our lives.
Perfect place to wrap things up. And I think if you are familiar with any of the work that we've been doing on Irish Stew, we're very much in line with what you're talking about. But let's bring in Seamus Plug and plug away.
I'm sorry, guys, but my Seamus plug has to be for my own show. I Can't Believe It's Not Ireland. I'm going to be going over. San Francisco is where I'm starting on the 28th of February. I think I might be doing Murder Michael Collins there, would you believe? It'll be the only one of those I'll do. But I will be adding shows as I go along. And then March 1st, I'm doing I Can't Believe It's Not Ireland in San Francisco. Go to paddycullivan.com for all my dates. 4th of March, Kansas City. Portland, Maine, 7th. Boston, 8th. And then New York on the 12th and the 14th. So I've got 7 dates so far. And I'm hoping to add more. So if anyone in Chicago is listening to help me break up that journey between Kansas and Portland, Maine, let me know, or Cincinnati or anywhere like that. I have contacted everybody. But again, I want the thing to grow organically. And I really want to bring this story to America because I think it's not just advantageous to the Irish American community or anything like that, but it's to anybody who wants to see a hopeful future. So paddycullivan.com for all my dates. All the links are there. And do it now, because if I can do well in America and spend time over there doing this, then I can actually take a break over here. Because the roads are terrible.
And so, with that update on road conditions in Ireland, on behalf of our listeners and John and myself, we'd like to thank Paddy Cullivan for coming on and sharing his unique take on Irish history and wonderful humor. So thank you, Paddy.
Thank you so much, guys. It's an honor. Thank you so much.
More
Irish Stew is produced by John Lee, Martin Nutty, and Bill Schultz. Editing, mixing, and mastering by Bill Schultz. Music on Irish Stew was composed and performed by Rosa Nutty, with Donald Bones on drums, Cathal O'Riordan on bass and synthesizer. For more on Rosa Nutty's music, please visit rosanutty.com.